Let's have some fun. Yo, it's Nog Chats, where I, Nogarremi, chat. Joining me today for my second episode is Mr. Thomas Winkley.
Bum, bum,
In the
bum.
future.
That wasn't a nog pause? That wasn't just a, hey, it's your turn, Tom? Okay, I'm sorry. Like, it was so weird.
Back to the present. Tom, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How you doing? How you living?
I'm living. I'm better off than most in the pandemic season that has now almost been a full year. It's hard to believe that it's been like 9 or 10 months at this point.
Right. 10 months of just isolation.
Yeah, I do have a roommate, so I haven't been completely isolated. And I do a whole bunch of commentary, as I'm sure you know. And now I've started this podcast to even help me talk with more people because it wasn't enough. And I feel like even that the 2 weeks that this podcast gets uploaded is a little long. I was like, because I scheduled you, I think, like, as soon as I finished the last one. And I'm like, I got to wait so long to talk to Tom.
Right.
I'm like,
I mean, you can just, like, ping me and say, hey, do you want to hop on a Discord call? Sans podcast, and I will do that.
yeah, but, I don't want to bother you too much. You got a wife.
Whatever.
I'm just
I do got one of those.
I'm a lonely bachelor, just chilling. But one of the things I did want to talk to you about is drinks, because I know you have a very full bar, like extremely full.
My bar has been, and it wasn't that full before quarantine, but then it just slowly kept filling up as we, experimented. So.
Oh, you're like, oh, I want to try making this drink or try this drink just to taste it. And it's just like, okay, well, I need to buy this thing. It's just like, you only use that one thing and that one drink. And you're like, well, what else do I do with this?
Right, exactly.
That's me with a bottle of white rum that I bought a way long time ago, before quarantine even started. It only has 2 shots that have been poured out of it, maybe 3 shots. I can't find a use for white rum. Anytime I'm like, let's go with some clear liquor. I'm like, and do a shot. I'm like, we're gonna do tequila if we're doing shots. Then if I mix something, it's just like tequila or gin. It's never white rum.
So I did find a good rum drink actually yesterday. So it was my friend's birthday, and we had a little Zoom call brunch, and so I threw together something. So I just did, like, I think it was 2 shots of white rum, some peach juice and 2 slices of peach, some orange juice and some Sprite, and made like a little breakfast fruit drink. It was pretty good. So if you're looking for like a 9 a.m. boozy drink, that's not bad. It's not a bad use of rum.
It's not bad. I was thinking about picking up some pineapple juice and making some Mai Tais.
Yeah, there you go.
I need a different dark rum, though, because the only dark rum that we have is Kraken, which I don't think floats super well on that.
It's also not my favorite rum. Like, the bottle's cool, but I don't know that it's my favorite flavor of rum that I've had.
Yeah, my roommate likes it, so he pays for it and keeps it around and allows me to drink it if I want it. So I typically let him do what he wants with it. But other than that, I don't do too many mixed drinks. There's always what I call the Nogarremi, because I haven't found a name for it, which is gin, apple juice shaken together, and then topped with some ginger ale. Always a classic drink. Pretty sweet. You got to be careful.
I haven't
with
had
it. I talked about it on the D&D show that you ran. I talked about it with somebody there during the intermission. I think the second time I was on. And they were like, oh, that sounds really good. And I think they messaged me later and was like, oh, that is a really good drink. Thank you so much for letting me know. I'm like, thanks. If you know the real name for it, let me know.
What's crazy is I actually have, like, we wanted to make like I don't know if you've ever had we do like whiskey and cider together. So you get like a spice cider and just dump some whiskey in it. It gives you like a nice warm kind of holiday drink.
Yeah.
But we do curbside, and the grocery store gave us apple juice instead of apple cider. So I actually have like half a gallon of apple juice in my fridge, and I've got 3 bottles of gin. So I think that's what I'm gonna be trying. Well, yeah, because we bought Roku gin, which is this really good Japanese gin. It's made by Suntory, and they do a lot of the whiskeys. So we've got that, but then we have like local gin. So Utah has a really good distillery. I think it's called Beehive Distilling. And so they have, or maybe the gin is Beehive Gin and it's by a different distillery in Utah. But either way, it's a really good, like, florally gin.
Right.
And then we like fruity gins. So whenever Anna visits her parents in Colorado, she'll always bring back like a mulberry gin or like a raspberry or a peach, like various infusions of gins too. So
Those sound pretty good. Usually I
they're
just
pretty
rock
good.
it with a bottle of Hendrix. Nothing good
Hendrix
bottle.
is a good gin.
Yeah, nothing fancy, but definitely a good gin. I think it's the only gin I've ever had, and I fell in love with it when I first bought it. I bought it at the beginning of quarantine. I bought a bottle of Hendrix, and I was like, I don't know, I don't really like gin. Like I hadn't gotten into it, and then
Right.
I mixed it with a couple of things. I'm like, you know what, this is pretty good. Like
Yeah.
I'm pretty hooked on this, and then I found the drink at the Nogarremi. I'm like, all right, we gotta just roll with this.
That sounds amazing.
The best part is don't measure any part of your drink. Just do, you know, 2-ish shots of gin, some amount of alcohol of apple juice, and top with however much ginger ale you want. You know,
And just go ham, yeah. Because ginger ale should really be like a topper, right? Like add some fizz, add some bubble, add a little spice, but like I don't think it should be most of the drink.
it really is like sometimes I go real light on the apple juice, so I have to add a lot of ginger ale. Sometimes I
That's
put a
fair.
lot of apple juice in. I get like 2 ounces of ginger ale in there. I'm like, all right, this is it. Just a little
This is
bubble,
it.
and that's it. It really is. You can there's a spectrum for it, and I want to stress there is no actual recipe for this. It's every time I make it, I and my roommates in the room, I'm like, yep, I'm gonna put in some amount of apple juice. No idea how much.
Yep.
Sometimes it's 4 shots of gin. Sometimes it's 1 shot of gin. It's really a variety
How
drink.
the real question is how stressful was the day preceding the drink, right? Because the higher the stress, the higher the gin amount, and then the rest just kind of offsets from there, right? Like that's that's
I
the that's the math.
yeah, I don't don't really know. It's been so long at this point. I can't remember. Uh, I think it was somewhere in the middle. It definitely wasn't the strongest that I've made the drink. It definitely wasn't the weakest. So I found like the perfect. It was like the perfect one. It's like you could make this one and hand it to anybody, and they would taste it and been like, "I can't tell there's gin in this, but there's a good amount of gin in there."
Yeah. Well, and that's a good drink to have too, right? Because if someone
It's
doesn't like a type of alcohol, being able to mask it is really helpful.
it's a terrifying thing that I figured out. Apple
That
juice
too.
and
That too.
gin, very terrifying to figure out that they cover each other very well. And so it's just like, oh man, I don't know how much alcohol's in this. That's terrible.
That's so
you
dangerous.
you drink half of it and you're like, where am I?
Yeah, those are those nights where like you look over at the bottle as you're going to bed and it's like three quarters empty and you're like, oh fuck. I
Yeah.
mean, oh crap. It's like so like those are the nights that really hit you, right? Where you look over and you're like, tomorrow the morning is gonna be rough. I've had a few of those on the online local.
Oh yeah. Well, the online local is it's something different. you
It is
gotta
different.
drink
That show.
you gotta drink on that show, and it will mess you up by the end of the night. Especially, I know that they start. You mostly have started making it a 2 shift kind of program. Previously, when it was 1 shift, when I was on it, you're drinking all night, for like 4 or 5 hours.
Right.
You're
Right.
you're
Right.
drinking. Top 8 and really like the top 4 really gets a little blurry for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening?
You're identifying characters by silhouettes, not as much by names.
Yeah, I'm like, who's on which side? I forgot.
Wait, did Joe not switch the names? He doesn't switch names. I can't read. Oh no. Oh
Why are we
no.
still on small screen?
I have to say the two shift thing's been interesting because like at first it was working really really well, but now like and it could just be the start of the year, but like the commentator well was like super robust and everybody wanted on, and then everybody was kind of like, cool, we did it once, we're out. So it's kind of gone back to that full shift type stuff. The difference for me is I now just say I'm gonna have two cocktails during the show, and it seems to be working a little bit better.
Yeah, that's that's the way that it goes. You tone yourself. I know when I was in college and I had early morning classes afterwards, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna drink 3 beers at most, and sometimes I stuck to it. Sometimes I drank way more. Sometimes I had 5 or 6 beers, and I was like, okay, that's half my. Dude, this is what you have to realize. I worked a couple of jobs in college. Half of my weekly expenses were beer, just to drink during the online local. I would finish a 6-pack in a night. I'm like, that was my beer for the week. And I'm like, all right.
All right, I guess I don't drink the rest of the week.
Else. I was like, that sucks. I would go to parties explicitly to steal their leftover liquor that they have. I'm like, I'm gonna show up to this party and they're gonna give this away because they don't want this anymore, and I'm just gonna scurry away with it. And that's how I ended up with another bottle. It was actually still white rum, which I don't really drink. So I was like, how do I use this? And I don't remember how I got rid of that bottle. I drank everything that was in there. I think I just ended up doing shots of it in tournament. I was like, okay,
that sounds right.
Don't do shots of white rum. It's rough. Well, Bacardi.
Rum is really sugary too. Like,
that's fine.
And sugary stuff. Yeah, but like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like rum just has a higher sugar content than tequila. But it could also be just that most of the rum drinks that you drink have like blue curacao, Sprite, fruit juice, like they're mixed with a ton of sugary stuff. So maybe I'm just applying that across the board.
Yeah, it definitely could be that. I don't know, sugar in a lot of stuff doesn't affect me super a lot. I've like basically OD'd my system on sugar. It doesn't know which way is what. And just to tell the people at home how crazy that gets, last night I made cookie dough and I ate half of that cookie dough, and I was like, the only regret that I had was I just ate a bunch of calories, and that was the only thought in my mind. I was just as tired, just as sleepy. The sugar had no effect on me. I just sat there. I'm like, that was just a lot of calories that I didn't need to eat.
Yep. Now you're gonna just like lay in bed for 2 days like a snake, just letting it digest.
Well, I would, except I got up today and I had a podcast.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You did get up and make a podcast.
And for the people at home, this is being recorded on Sunday the 16th? 17th.
17th. Yeah, how time flies.
In the morning. So there's a bit of a time skip between when this gets uploaded on Wednesday. Yeah. But there was something. What I'm drinking now. That's the important part. I drink a lot of beer now.
That's fair. Beer's good, and you live in a state where there's good beer access.
You say that, but compared to where I was for college, it's so much worse. I used to go to a beer warehouse, a full building filled on every shelf with beer. Now I go to a Bevmo where one row is beer. And I'm just like, your selection is so poor and irritating.
That's fair. That's fair.
So I feel like I have less choice, but I'm still able to find some cool stuff. I'm currently drinking The Abyss by Deschutes in Bend, Oregon. Deschutes.
That sounds really familiar. Show me do you have the can in front of you? I want to see that can.
I do not. It's not a can. It's a bottle because it's one of their reserve series. So it's like a 20 to 24 ounce bottle.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's like 11%, 10 to 11%.
It's almost like a barley wine at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I think in terms of beer percentage, I think the highest thing I've ever had is 13%. I don't even remember what beer that was, but it's hard at that point, I think, for the beer to get over that. Like, I haven't seen 15. Like, I haven't seen it reach like a wine standpoint.
We have one here. It's called the Rev. It's seasonal. It's only available. It's from a Red Rock Brewing. And it's only available, I think, like springtime, maybe spring into summer. But it's a 17%. Oh man, I've got to look it up and remember. I think it's is it an ale?
Well, you'll figure that out. I can also talk about some of the other stuff that I've been drinking. I just tried this week the Sierra Nevada's 2021 version of the Bigfoot, which is a barley style ale. I don't remember exactly what was on it, but it was pretty light and drinkable despite it being, I think, again, like 9%. A lot of these craft beers that I drink are now getting really up there in percentage.
Yep.
And it's hard to remember each one specifically, but it's one of the things where, like, I'll do a little tasting session with my roommate because he doesn't drink too many beers, so I've really especially during quarantine, I've tried to really nail down like, okay, we're gonna get you into beer, so I'm just gonna have you try all of these beers. But it's Sierra Nevada. It had some pretty high bitterness, so that was to be expected. But he didn't seem to mind that much, which I think is really just a testament to how much I have moved him along, which is pretty terrific. But it was a pretty big shock when he's like, he drank like a sip or two of it, and he's like, what percentage is this? And I looked at the bottle, I'm like, oh, it's a worrisome percent for beer. It's like you have to like that's more or less what I categorize things, where it's just like, oh, I have to be worried about this, or oh, okay, this is okay. It's like 7 or 8% is like where I draw the line of like, oh, this is okay, and then like above that I'm like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And actually looking at it, it's not. So I looked up the beer on their site, and it was pitched as super, super high alcohol content. It's a Belgian triple.
Oh yeah,
but it's only 10.3% though. So I was under the impression it was like 17, but I mean 10.3 is still good for a beer. But
yeah, if they do different batches per year, especially like you said, it was seasonal, so they might change the recipe every year. It could definitely change the alcohol in it. So there's a bunch of that. I drink another. Oh, I know what other beer I drink. I've been drinking a lot of Chimay. Nice.
Yeah, you do love Chimay.
I do love Chimay, and thankfully the Bevmo by me gets to import it all the time. Real funny, the first time that I went there, the couple bottles of Chimay that were on the shelf still were 2018 reserves.
Wow.
So like on the cork it says 2018 and everything like that. So the beer was sitting there for a while. I might be one of the only people that goes in there and buys Chimay consistently. I took a couple of bottles, and like they were at one point they were completely out of Chimay White because I apparently took in the last two bottles that I think were both 2018 reserve, and they had nothing else. And they're like, oh shit, we have to buy Chimay White. This dude is the only one that drinks.
This is the one person.
So I definitely go through and make sure that I grab a bottle of that every once in a while. This past time though, I never noticed if they had it before or not. They had a little package that was 12-ounce bottles of Chimay White, Red, and Blue. They actually had Chimay Gold in there as well, which you don't see that often. Chimay Gold, it's a weird beer when you talk about the Chimay lineup, and you're like, oh yeah, Chimay Gold. Doesn't get the big bottle import into the USA like you would imagine, because all Chimay bottles I think are maybe 28-ounce, 30-ounce bottles, almost like a wine. And so it was pretty weird because they don't import the gold ever. I don't know if Chimay just doesn't sell it, if the person that imports it into the US doesn't import gold at all and then doesn't distribute gold therefore. But they had this little 4-pack of 12-ounce bottles, and it came with a Chimay glass, a Chimay branded glass. And so I now have a official Chimay glass, and it's fantastic.
I have 3 more. I'm going to give you when I see you next. We had a friend give us some, so it's the same one you showed the picture of, right? With the rim, and it says Chimay across it. It's kind of got the goblet vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of those.
That'll be dope. Have you actually tried Chimay yet? Because I know one of the big things was you're going to come back to where I am, and I was going to take you through the stroll of all the Chimays.
Yeah, we actually have not, and I was actually, as we were talking about it, just looking it up on our alcohol. So Utah is a state-controlled place, right? So anything that's above 5%, you have to buy out of a state-run liquor store. Mm-hmm. So if the liquor store doesn't have it, the only way to get it in is to special order it, but you have to order a case.
A case? You don't want to commit to a case of Chimay?
Well, I don't mind committing to a case of Chimay if there are other people that will commit with me, right? Because a whole case of beer, like that's, well, maybe if it's good, I'll drink the whole thing. But I'm typing in Chimay in the item name right now for their inventory search, and it is not even listed. So we are not importing Chimay into Utah, it looks like.
That's rough. So our only options here, since I don't know how much longer quarantine's going to last, I can drive to you. It's a couple hours.
Only 13 or so.
Yeah, I can do it in one day. Don't tempt me. You will have to provide me a place to sleep for at least 8 hours. Can do. But I can come with 2 bottles of each kind that my place sells. Again, no Chimay Gold, which is real unfortunate. I can keep buying the 4-packs with the beer glass and just buy Chimay Gold for you to taste.
And just
But
have a whole cupboard full of Chimay glasses and throw the rest away.
yeah, the main thing with Chimay Gold, and I've only had it once or twice besides this because again, it just doesn't get imported to America like ever,
Right.
and it sucks. It's their lowest percentage at like 5.2 or 4.8, something like that. It's within 2% of five, like 2% of like the average baseline, and a lot of Chimays are higher alcohol percentage, so it's like 7 to 9%. Like it goes between like red, white, and blue. I think are the classic American colors, and that's going up in alcohol percentage. So 7, 8, and 9% is the way that's going to go. I really like Chimay White, and I think Chimay Gold is Chimay White but less alcohol content, less bitter, just a little bit, and it actually tastes really sweet and really good. Has a really good, a little bit of a malty taste, but not super a lot. It almost just feels unnaturally sweet a little bit for a beer, but it was really good. It went down real easy, and I enjoyed it a whole bunch. But man, we've talked a long time about alcohol.
I mean, there's so much to talk about. That's
There
kind of
is
the
so
cool
much.
thing, right? Is there's so much depth to like taste and what you like, and that's one of the wins from COVID isolation, right? Is I've had a ton of time to explore local breweries, local distilleries, all kinds of weird drinks, see what's new out there. So that's actually been kind of fun. But we don't have to talk about booze anymore. We can talk about other stuff if you would
Yeah, we
like.
we absolutely can. Running through the booze talk pretty hard. We do have a little bit in common. I don't think the languages are the same, but you do some programming and some Unity stuff, which
Yeah,
is
all C sharp.
pretty
Yeah.
pretty cool. I do a lot of Python development for like a Discord bot and all the other random programs that I make and use kind of sporadically are all made in
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Python.
yeah.
What's your opinion on Python as a language? Have you coded in Python before?
I have actually. So most of my Python stuff lately has been for work. And
Hmm.
it's been I've actually it's not like Python core. It's more R. So more data analytics side of things, right? Um, I don't mind it. So the thing about R that kind of stresses me out or frustrates me is that like I think about things like an object-oriented programmer, right? I think about things like okay, if I want to make like okay, I want to get this
Yeah,
data set and I want to clean it, right? So my first instinct is like okay, cool. I need to store this data set in a variable in an array, and then I'll parse through the array and do the things, and then once I do that, I'll just export my results.
yeah,
But in R, it's not like that. R is literally like, yo, clean this dot file, and it just does it. So it's not R to me, and I'm not an R expert, but the stuff I've done with it, it's more of like a package of tools that you can just like break out on the file instead of like writing your own classes and things like that. So I haven't done as much Python core. I would like to. I actually really want to write a Discord bot. I think that would be super fun.
well,
But I just haven't put time aside. So
there's a terrific kind of bot already made if you want to take a look at it and take pieces of it at
is it
lizardman301 slash liz bot rsf on GitHub.
okay? Okay. I was gonna ask if it was on GitHub somewhere so I could take a look at it.
Absolutely. We just started opening issues for it so that we can track when we're fixing stuff or
Dope.
do feature requests instead of just like we have a Discord chat all set up that we all talk in and are like, okay, we need to fix this thing. And it's just like, okay, it's fixed. And it's just like, okay, we need
That's
a better
awesome.
change log.
Yeah, you do. I think that's really cool. I like the idea of Discord bots too. So like we have a gent in our Utah Discord that's actually writing a tournament bot for us. That's going to
Oh,
allow
yeah,
us
I
to
saw
create.
that.
Yeah, and he's doing it all in React and Node, um, which is super
Yeah.
interesting.
I think that integrates better with what Discord actually is. But again, it's just
Mm,
a bot. All they have to do is
change
listen
it.
and then process whatever is said in chat.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So as long as you can process text inputs and listen, right, you're good.
Yeah.
So that's actually a
It's
question I'd want to ask. Does your bot listen to so does it read every line typed in Discord then to parse out and then you're basically saying if line parsed is matches a command then do a thing?
So that's basically it. In order to lessen the load a little bit, there's a check that checks if the line starts with a prefix, and if it starts with a prefix, then we'll go and run through all the commands. And this is because we have a dynamic prefix that you can set. So like you can have exclamation point or a question mark
or hashtag or
whatever character you want. Hashtag and @ is a little difficult because those are Discord. Discord will take hold of those immediately because you can type a channel or a username.
Yeah.
So I usually would suggest not using those. It'll work, but every time that you type a command, it'll try to autocorrect to somebody's name. Have fun. That's That's basically the support for it. Have fun. We made it with exclamation point in mind.
That's pretty standard.
So Lizardman started the project. Lizardman301 at Lizardman301 on Twitter. He started the project. He started with just having every time that you typed a command, there was a long if-else statement of like, if it was this command, run this thing.
Yep.
I got into it. I was like, okay. Like I got into it. I added some commands because he needed some more functionality, and I'm like, okay. We got that working. Well, rather, I think I switched him to a database because previously all of LizardBot would use the same stuff, and so nothing was segmented. So if one tournament was running, you couldn't run 2 tournaments with LizardBot at the same time because it would use the same variables and not know what to do. It would basically
so it would start writing each other over and
So if one tournament, if one Discord called round 2, but the other one was still on round 1, it would override it, and then if somebody did like the status command or something like that, it would pop up and be like, it's round 2 now. And the TO and that point is like, it's not round 2. And it was very fun. And I solved that problem for them by just telling them to make a database. And I integrated a database with them so that they can keep track of different servers at different times. And it works out really good. Use PyMySQL for that, just because that's the library I've always used. And it works with MariaDB because MariaDB is built on SQL and it's great.
Yep.
Or MySQL. That was the first big change I implemented. The second one was like, okay, we fixed that. That was the immediate issue we had to go through and fix. But this is horrendous. This is so hard to navigate. It's one large file with one large function. This is terrible.
Yeah, it needs to be more modular for sure, right? Like you should always try to less is more generally.
Yeah, and so I went through first off because none of it was commented. So I'm like, okay, well, we're going to do that. We're going to break it apart. I went and did some research on some other Discord bots. I found a bot called Yaksha. You can also find their GitHub. I think it's Yaksha bot. I don't know who writes it or who it's under. But you can go find their bot. I used a lot of stuff from them. They have a very nice way of having Python have a dictionary of classes that are associated with. It basically uses a register function to register the function. There's a lot to it.
So it almost sounds like an event handler or I'm trying to think of the term that we use in C#.
A little bit like that. But basically, at the beginning, there's an entire file called commands. Before every function in there, there's an @register, and it will register what command that function is related to. And so once they're all registered, it'll actually register like, okay, this command name goes with this function, and there'll be an array of that, so that when we're parsing through messages, we can be like, okay, we found one of the allowed commands. We're going to feed it into this function. This function will then call this because the array will tell it where to find that function.
Yep.
It works really well. And it allows things to be much more readable. There are a few large ones that still need to get broken up that I just haven't figured out how to do it, how to refactor it. But I'm not a classically trained programmer in any sort of the way. I just kind of throw stuff together, and I'm like, all right, it works. And then I'll look at it. I'll look at it a month later and be like, that looks terrible. Let's fix that. And then I'll like fix it a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, that's readable enough that somebody better than me could come in, understand it, and probably want to fix it themselves.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the way that a lot of coding works, right? When I was learning a lot of Unity dev in my earlier days, the guy I was working with always said like, "You'd code like an asshole, right? Like, just code to solve the problem, and then go back and refactor it into more eloquent stuff." Because first of all,
Yeah.
like that's how I've learned a ton of my programming chops is like, okay, I need this specific challenge to be met, so I go and I meet it, and then like a week later, I go back and look at the code, and I'm like, man, this is bad. Like, how can I? And then you discover, oh, there's a class that handles this that's more eloquent, or I can break this chunk out, or this, and you start getting more. Your code starts to become cleaner. You solve problems faster. Like that's how you learn. So
Yeah. And it's definitely one of the things where like you look back on it like a week later and you're like, oh, how was I this bad? Like you feel like in that week like you've gotten
yeah,
better.
absolutely you have because you've had time to like mentally digest the problem, right? Like you actually. So I stream a lot of my coding. Mainly because I'm trying to so I have to recertify for my Unity expert programmer in February.
And where can we
So,
find your stream?
twitch.tv/Thomas Winkley.
There we go.
It's funny because, like, as much as I do fighting game stuff, like, my stream is not as much fighting game oriented as it probably could be. It's really just, like, a place for me to unwind and talk to friends. And honestly, right now, it's a lot of Unity coding. But, I mean, you can, like, last Thursday, you can watch me go through that in real time. It was like I had to spawn a bunch of asteroids, so I wrote the class to do that, got everything set up, and then realized like I have to initialize velocity on these asteroids, and because of the speed of multi-core programming, I was getting null errors because they were instantiating and trying to get the velocity set basically simultaneously, which doesn't work.
Yeah.
So
You kind of need one to happen first, and then it can edit the value.
yeah, and so really it's going to be like, all right, cool. So I'm actually like, as I was in the shower yesterday, it was like, okay, this is actually how I have to solve this problem because there's a whole chain of things that need to happen. And so that's what I'm going to do Monday or probably tomorrow because tomorrow's a holiday for me. I'm probably just going to code. Yeah.
That's honestly the weirdest part of programming is you'll be sitting
Yep.
there doing something completely unrelated. And you're like, that's it. That's how I do
Yep.
it.
Yep. Yep. I was so on that same vein, I was working on what problem was it for the coding? Oh, it was just getting like a basically it's a so we're basically for this thing to practice, we're making an asteroids clone is what it is. It's a clone of
Yeah.
asteroids. And it's all like all the it's
I
super
do
fun.
love some asteroids. Let me just tell you.
Yeah.
I played the hell out of that in high school. I would just sit there and play asteroids anytime we were in a computer lab.
It's a good game, and if you look at it from a game development perspective, it surfaces a lot of really interesting problems to solve. So you've got screen wrapping, you've got parent-child relationships within objects, you've got obviously collisions and detonations, you've got point calculation, you have UI, UX, you have level progression, like everything you need. Like Asteroids pretty much encompasses a ton of programming challenges. So that's what we're making for this. And I was having trouble. So one of the things is like you want the ship to tilt as you move it with velocity, right?
Yeah.
And so I was kind of working on like how do I make the ship tilt on this axis, and I was like, man, it's got to be easier than this. And I was really overcomplicating it. I was like, well, I got to go to the gym, so I'm gonna put my shoes on and go work out. When I come back, and literally as I was tying my shoes, the answer hit me.
Yeah.
And like I walked upstairs, wrote the one line of code, and then went to the gym. Like it's just how coding is, you know?
Now, that is always the struggle because a lot of times the solution will come as you're falling asleep and you're like, that's it. And the struggle is, do I get up and do this or do I go to sleep and risk forgetting it?
You got to keep that notepad by your bed, right? Roll over and write it down or something.
I've definitely done that. I've definitely had, this was when I was in college. I had an assignment that I was working on. I'm like, I just can't figure this out. I typed all day. There's this error that I'm getting. I'm like, it's whatever. It's 1 o'clock. I got to sleep. I got classes in like 6 hours. Yep. And I would lay down. I would be like, I figured it out. Son of a gun. And I figured it out. Like within 5 minutes of me laying down, I'm like, do I get up and do this now? I'm like,
but
I should.
You should, or you just write a note, right? Like, cause like for me being a married dude, like I can't jump out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and run up to my office. A, I might scare the shit out of my wife if I jump out of bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. B, like if I wake her up, then she's got to work the next day, then I messed up her sleep, and there's a whole thing there. But I think you can apply that to like everything, like fighting games. Yeah, like think about situations you're trying to deal with as a fighting game competitor or even as a commentator. Like as a commentator, I've had this happen. I'm like, I just don't know how I would talk through that scenario or what that player was thinking. And then like, just like programming, a day later, 2 days later, I'll be eating chips or in the shower or throwing a rope for my dog. And my brain will be like, they did it because of this and that made this happen. And that, cause your subconscious is like, your brain's a computer, right? It's chewing on shit in the background, it's processing.
Yeah.
So that's always a nice thing to remember. If anything, if you're getting frustrated, you're getting angry, you're getting overwhelmed, it's
Go
not a bad
relax.
idea to take a walk. Yeah,
Yeah.
take a walk. Yeah.
You can overwork your brain. It can get stressed
Yep.
out and it's not
Yep.
gonna function as well. You're like it's like a computer overheating. Like it's just gonna reach a certain point and
Yeah.
it's just not gonna work anymore. If we're gonna keep using that computer metaphor. Although
Yep.
to go off of that, I have been called a robot several times, especially during college. When I was a freshman in college, they all of my floor mates. I had to live in the dorm the first year. All of my floor mates were like, "Yeah, you're really just like a robot. Like we know what you're going to do and say in every situation because it's all mapped out." I'm like, "Of course it's mapped out. What are you guys doing? You guys are having conversation based on how you feel. What is this?"
What the hell? Feelings? Get out of here.
It was weird. But it did really help me learn about myself and how to like be a more interesting human, and that's
Sure.
very important. I started college, and I was probably one of the most introverted people you could imagine, and now I do commentary and talk to all sorts of people constantly. So
Yeah, you do. And like I've hung out with you in person multiple times, right? Like you're fun to hang out with. You're a good dude to have around. So
yeah, it was a little bit different before college. Let's just leave it at
that's fair.
that.
That's fair. I will say, like, you're definitely like is left brained, right? Like you're incredibly left brained. Like that's just a
I
because
have
right
no idea
brain is
what side
creative,
of the
right?
brain. No,
So
no idea.
so left brain is very like methodical, process oriented, technical, and right brain is more the creative side.
I will say I don't have a lot of creativity.
And I'm similar. I'm like a little bit more left than right, but I would argue that you're a pretty left-brained individual.
Yeah, it definitely does most of the work. I follow through situations pretty logical. You've heard me commentate. It's a lot of play by play and then analysis. So there's not
Yep.
like
Yep.
super a lot of like popping off or color commentary where I'm going all over the place. I'm keeping it pretty straightforward and clean, as entertaining as I can be. So,
But that's why we work as a team. Though. That's why Nogarremi is so powerful. Because I am just a giant bearded bundle of energy. So
somebody has to be, and this is something that I've worked on over, I guess 2 years now. That's wild. Is getting hype and still providing that analysis. So like, this is something that St. Cole is always telling me. It's like, dude, the way that you get hype and are still analyzing the situation and like still talking about it in such a deep manner is super crazy. Like you integrate it super well where like people can tell you're excited about what's happening on screen and you just want to like share all of this information that I have inside.
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yes, that's exactly it. I have all this information about what's happened in the situation and it's so cool. And I just want to tell
Yeah.
people how cool it is.
Yep, and I think that's something I've been working on in my commentary. Is I generally lean more towards hype than an analytical, and I'm trying to get on more on the analytical side, right? But I think it's really interesting because when I think about like commentators that found a style, and actually Cola was talking about this on one of his streams that I was in, and he was talking about how like you and I have very defined styles of commentary, and he knows
we?
it's us on the mic. That's what he said, and just like I said the same thing you said. I said, "Do we?" Because like I had never considered my style. Like it's not something I had ever thought about. Like, oh, stylistically, I want to be this. It's just kind of how it came, right? Like, and I feel like the only reason my style is what it is because I started commentating while drinking on the online local and kind of found my groove, right? Like I found this like rhythm that I can sit in, and it just I guess happened to be unique.
You just reminded me of the early stuff that I did with
Oh
RSF.
man, me too.
Oh my goodness, it was so bad because I hadn't drank too much with a mic in front of me before. Usually when I drink, I'm a quieter individual. I'm not.
Yep.
It's hard to get me to talk most of the time. So I had a microphone in front of me while drinking. I'm like, I don't know. B, I don't commentate. I hadn't commentated that much at that point. So
Yeah.
all I can talk about is what I know as a player. And so it's very terrifying. And the alcohol helps with that, but part of it is also still terrifying because now there's alcohol in you.
It's also terrifying too because like I don't know if this is as applicable to you, but like I spent so much time watching streams, right? Like I mean, I came up in the Street Fighter 4 era, right? So I watched so many tournaments, so many streams. and there was so much commentary from viewers on, oh, I hate this commentator, I hate this commentator's dumb for these reasons. Like
Yeah.
something that still makes me mad to this day is that people don't like Ski Sonic. Like
Dude,
people,
to this day, people will still talk about Ski Sonic being a bad commentator. I'm like,
I loved Ski, I loved him.
he's definitely, like, compared to the other people that you would get at the time, where it's just like, oh, it's not, especially in that era where it's like, oh, it's not David, it's not David, it's
James.
not James, and it's not like Z or Mike Ross or somebody. It's just like
Yeah.
people would be like, "Who's this commentator? They suck. Get out of here." Uh, and
Yeah.
Ski took a lot of that really hard, and it's real unfortunate for him because he had,
Yep.
he's a really good commentator. He was really knowledgeable about Street Fighter 4.
Super
So
knowledgeable, and like he had really good like vocal tonations, inflections. Like he was also like when if I could not be watching and I could tell you exactly if it was Ski on the mic, right? And I know a lot of people hated Z Sonic too, but I liked him because he was like the ultimate reference king. Like a lot of the riffing that I try to do is because Z Sonic riffed so well. His riffs were not Z Sonic, sorry, Zeep. His riffs were godlike.
yeah,
Anyway, so but I had a lot of like tension and worry about that, right? Because I was like, man, like what if I'm doing the work, I'm commentating, and people just decide they hate me, or I say something wrong and people like come at me. So I was actually afraid, like really afraid to say wrong shit. And I have to say, like, because of good communities, like even like the online local, and even like within Utah, right? If I'm like, oh man, I'm pretty sure that was minus, and then someone's like, oh no, actually that was plus, it became very easy to be like, oh damn, it is plus. Look at that. Well, there you go, and I just kind of roll with it, which I thought
yeah.
was fun.
That's most of it.
Anyway,
Part of it is once you, especially when you're like somebody like St. Colo who's actually broken through and stuff like that, you don't get as much interaction with Twitch chat. They get to be a lot more troll, especially when you're running
yeah,
with tens of thousands of
CPT,
viewers and that kind
yeah.
of stuff. And it's just like, all right, so maybe not look at the chat constantly while while commentating.
Oh, absolutely no. I couldn't imagine seeing the chat during like a bigger event like that, right? Like I think like 300 to 500 viewers, chat is manageable. After that, you just got to kind of wing it.
Yeah, pretty much. I go back and forth. I'll look at chat sometimes almost religiously, especially if I'm commentating a local that I don't know as much. They can really help provide a lot of information about some stuff, especially if there's
Yeah.
characters I'm not used to seeing as much. They can be like, okay, no, like, yeah, they can correct me. And that's great knowledge for me. I get to learn and see a whole lot of new people, which I love, and then be better, especially for my kind of style of commentary where I'm like heavy with like knowing everything that's going on,
Right.
which makes me terrified because I'm primarily a Street Fighter 5 commentator. I don't really commentate anything else. And for a while, back when I was in college, I would commentate my club. I made an entire club, RITFGC. The thing that was very apparent to me as more and more people started showing up and apparently were more willing to just tell me that I was commentating stuff wrong. They're like, oh yeah, in this situation, this thing is happening, and that means this option isn't viable. And it was one of the things where I'm like, oh, I just never learned that. Thanks for telling me, because otherwise I would never know. And this was really big in Under Night. I would commentate Under Night, but I don't watch Under Night or
Yeah.
learn anything about Under Night. I play Under Night, or at least Under Night ST was the last one that
Yeah. Yeah.
I did. But it was one of the things where it was the game that I played for fun. So I didn't look up anything about it. I didn't do anything else about it. I just played it and I commentated based on that. I commentated based on my level of knowledge that I had with the game, which wasn't a lot.
Right.
But moving forward,
Yeah.
I
I'm the
don't
same
wanna,
way with Mortal Kombat. So
yeah, and it's very, I'm pigeonholed way more than I feel like any other commentary really is at this point. I completely just know Street Fighter 5. I play some other fighting games here and there, but never to the depth of knowledge that I have in Street Fighter 5. No other fighting game has captured me and has kept my attention for 5 years. So,
yeah. That's impressive.
what am I supposed to do? Like, I can't be disingenuous to what I enjoy and stuff like that, which I think is always a
Yep.
big thing that Sage Jim's talking about. I was like, yeah, if I like the game and enjoy commentating it, I'll do those things. Otherwise, I'm not going to.
Well, it comes through in your performance too, right? And like commentary is a performance to a degree, and that emotion, that energy, that feeling, right? Like the reason why people can see you getting hype, even if you're giving technical commentary, is because you are getting excited because the level of the interaction is there for you. And if you don't have that, or if a really sick like nothing lands worse in commentary than if a really sick interaction happens and you're just like, dang, that was a cool interaction, right? Like sometimes, I mean, sometimes you can make it really hype, but like being able to explain why that was so cool gives it another layer of excitement for the viewer, I think.
No other character has given me as much problems as Zangief. Every time I commentate a Zangief player in chat will be like, "Oh, that was a sick micro walk," and I'm like, "I didn't see a micro walk at all."
Yeah, yep. I didn't see that.
Like, what am I missing in this Zangief brain? Like,
Yep.
there's something that's not there. And then you watch Mike Too Strong, and you're just like, "Oh, he's just doing all." Like, I've had talks with Mike about this as well. Mike Too Strong, phenomenal Zangief player, and the thing he does best is just waiting. Like, his reaction speed is kind of ridiculous, and he says that it's getting worse because he's getting older and stuff like that, and he's been playing a lot of Valorant, and I'm sure it can really matter in that game where it's just like, if you don't make your shot at the right time, then you're dead. But like, the ways that I've seen him wait to jump air SPD his opponent is a little ridiculous. So he definitely keeps it on fire, and he's definitely doing everything he can to be the best version of him when he's playing Street Fighter. Now, granted, he came back for like a week and a half, and then he left again. And I'm like, holidays.
But in that week and a half, didn't he win like 3 tournaments? Like, I swear to God, that dude came through, won a bunch of tournaments, and was like, all right, I'm good.
He came through. I started on a Saturday. He started playing in a Midwest tournament. He got second place for that. So he won the last chance qualifier and then got second place in the finals.
That's right.
So
for the one the overhaul does, right?
Yeah, the closing the distance or closing distance. So he did win a tournament. He did unfortunately lose one right after that, but it was a long day for him. And then on Thursday the following week, he played in 2 tournaments and won both of them. Yeah. And it was just a little ridiculous.
It's super ridiculous to come back and play at that level. Especially, he won Digital Havoc, which means he had to get over Flux Waves. He had to get over Space Boy.
He beat Flux Waves poison in the Zangief matchup.
That's sick.
People, listen, I know most of my audience plays Street Fighter 5 because that's all who I follow or who follows me on Twitter. Right. You have to realize Zangief Poison is, I think, the second worst matchup for Zangief. Like, there's Dulcim, and then there's Poison.
Menot's, and then Menot's third after
G.
that.
Like, G's a little bit bad, Menot's bad. There's, like, other bad characters, but I feel like the way that I've seen Zangief lose to Poisons,
it's brutal.
It's rough, bro. The only character I've seen control more of that space is Dulcim, and Poison is significantly easier, has higher access to larger damage, and can get real crazy on stuff. It's a little ridiculous. Has more options to be in an airborne state than Dulcim. There's a lot of stuff that Poison gets to do that makes that matchup difficult. But yeah, it was great to see Mike for a little bit. I hope he comes back. I'll probably ping him here in a little bit and be like, hey, gonna enter some tournaments again?
Yeah, like, I miss seeing Mike.
Even just once a month, like, that's enough. Like, we'll take anything.
We just need more hype. Yeah, we just need more Mike Too Strong.
We can't see you leave for 8 months, okay?
Watch him come back as like the world's best Dan player. I'm actually really excited for Dan next month.
That's an entire big thing where Capcom Cup officially got canceled.
Yeah.
So pretty rough. I don't know what they're gonna do with all the prize money and everything that they have. They did say that they're going to do some exhibition stuff, I think. So maybe they'll have like the players in each region play against each other that won. With how worldwide every qualifier was, it's difficult to kind of be like, oh, hey, all of you play each other in an online final now. That's not what they said. They said that they're going to do something, just not the same Capcom Cup finals. And I think the largest thing that everybody that qualified is concerned about is that prize money, because there was, I think, like, as every year there's like $250,000 at least up for line, and that's a lot of money.
I think isn't it $500,000 this year? I thought 250,000 was just first prize.
Bump up.
Yeah, because I think it
might be even more. Like, but there's at least that much. I think there's always at least that much, and then whatever sales they make on the CPT bundle, and stuff like that gets added to it. But like, there's always a bunch of money, like enough money to like sustain somebody for a couple of years, kind of money. And it's
Yeah.
definitely one of those things where it's just like, what are you doing with that money now?
Right. I mean, they've got to
uh,
do something with it. I think personally, I know it's not the best thing, but I think splitting it among the qualifiers might be the best option. Just being like, here you go, COVID sucks, or doing something. I don't know.
yeah,
Um,
it's tough to say what they're going to do with it. They could carry it over all into next year and make next year a big hoorah.
yeah, that would be
That would
dope.
be a lot of money. Especially for it becomes an even stranger thing at that point, just because like, how do you respect the people that have qualified already that want that
Right.
money? Um, you're in a rough place, and it becomes a thing like, does IDOM still get to auto qualify and that kind of stuff? It's a difficult place to
Mm.
be in. Uh, but to kind of bring it back around to maybe a little bit more generic, not programming, but commentating.
Yeah, yeah.
The the major thing, with Saint Cola doing all of his streams and actually getting to kind of voice his opinions on different commentators and that kind of stuff, it's really interesting how much he loves me and you. Uh, it really warms my heart. I haven't
Me
heard
too.
anybody talk to me or talk about me as emphatically as Saint Cola does,
Yeah.
and it's honestly it's a really heartwarming experience, because a lot of people are like, oh, that commentator sounded good, or most times they just don't say mean things, and it's just like, I guess
Right.
things are going good.
Which in Twitch chat, that's a win, right? Like, like not mean things is an endorsement, which is a whole other can of worms we could open up about Twitch chat. But like, I agree with you. Like, I feel the same way. Like, and it doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like a lie, right? Which also makes me uncomfortable because I'm not good at accepting praise. But it's really cool and it's really heartwarming. So I hope if Cole is listening, I hope you know, man. Like, he's actually one of my favorite commentators, and like he did something really cool for us last year that he may or may not realize, but he showed that like that weird glass ceiling between commentators and cool events and cool work is not as thick as we thought it was.
Oh,
And if you put in the work, you can make stuff happen, right? Like, so I thought that was really cool.
yeah, absolutely. I've definitely had a lot of people tell me like, hey, you reach out to us, we would love to have you, just don't have a reel. And that's been the thing that
Yep.
he's been hammering me about. A bunch of people have been hammering me about, like, where's
Yep.
your reel, bro? I had something lined up that was supposed to happen in like September. Everything fell apart, and there's no
Yep.
reel still because I'm incredibly busy. I work a full day job. I
Yep.
commentate so much. When I'm not commentating, I'm relaxing or programming, and
Yep. Yep. Yep.
it's a deep. My life is busy. I'm a young man,
Mhm.
so I try to stay
Mhm.
busy because I'm like, I'm not old enough to be lazy.
Right.
Uh, so
Well, I think too, like you have to like I've learned that I have to put stuff in a list. So like, cause I commissioned my reel on January 2nd, and it'll be done end of this month actually.
the
But
largest
the
part for
way
me. Go ahead.
I'll say is the way that I ended up doing that was like seriously right around my birthday in December. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna put like 30 minutes to an hour a week away and just like find clips of myself. So I started doing that, and I know you've already done that work. Doesn't your website have like a list of all these like awesome clip moments already there?
It has a list of all the tournaments and the VODs.
Ah, okay, okay.
I have no time after commentating event to go through and clip stuff
That's
because
fair.
I got to do other stuff. Like, usually I'm making dinner or doing chores or laundry, or like, there's so much
Yep.
even outside of working and some side projects that involves my involves me. And
Yep.
it's
Yep.
very complicated. I got to make calls to my family. Like, I don't think
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
realize
yeah.
like every part of my day is busy.
No, for sure. And like it's different. It's different as well, right? Because like you said, you've got to make calls to your family because you are. I mean, I know where your family lives. I'm not going to dox your family, but like your family is not in the same state as you by any means, right? So for you to keep that relationship up,
Yeah, and
like with me,
it's
I'm
not
a little
just.
luckier where my family lives with me, right? My wife is here. My parents live 20 minutes away. So,
Yeah, and it's not just with my parents, right? I still have my grandparents that I keep track of, my aunts and uncles that I tried to make sure I interact with at least at some point, my cousins. Like, I have very few like first cousins, but I try to make sure that I keep in contact with all of them. They're all way younger than me, so it's a little bit weird that I have to be
Yeah.
an adult. But you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm hitting that
But
point.
I would say if this helps you at all or helps anybody looking to make a reel, like what I did was I was like, hey, I need to start reviewing stuff. So I would also, as I was commentating, think about moments that I thought were like, oh man, that was a really good moment. That could be really good. And I would actually kind of like make a note of it, and then I would actually go check that stream's clips to see if somebody clipped it. And if they did, I would just download the clip and throw it in a folder.
I just
Um,
I just want
so
people to clip me as I'm commentating and send them all to me. Like just
that's what I did though, because people were like, "Yo, clip that," and they clip it, and then I'd go, "Oh, hey, that's really great," or I would at least have the timestamp to go reclip it myself. Um,
yeah, I just
but it helped. But it's
there's
work,
so
man.
much
Getting the clips is the biggest project.
there's so much that I do and work on in one broadcast that I don't keep track. And also like my keyboard's mad loud, so I don't want to type and be like, oh, at this point, like I need to go check this thing because
Yeah,
you know there is that uh kind of like I don't just want people to hear me typing the entire time. And a lot of times
sure,
because of the style that I commentate, if my voice isn't there, the commentary is really empty. Because I
yep,
talk a
yep,
lot. I say a lot of words, and my co-commentators used to that. So if I'm just gone because I'm muted because I'm typing something, I don't want to bother the stream chat. It's gone. That's an entire another part of it. Like if at any point I'm not looking at what's happening in the game, I'm not talking about what's happening in the game, and it's pretty much all on my co-commentator at that point. So I don't want to leave them behind. I can't type and talk
sure.
at the same time. That's an entire other thing.
That's
Uh,
that's an acquired skill for sure.
typing and talking is way beyond just like an acquired skill. You have to separate two parts of your brain between like your hands moving and your mouth saying words. It's difficult, especially because I like to gesture when I am talking.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
You
yeah,
guys
yeah.
can't see this in the video or in the audio version of the podcast, but me and Tom have webcam set up, and I have been gesturing. Even if you don't
Yep,
see the gestures, Tom, I'm gesturing below the camera. Like I'm down here and I'm gesturing
yep,
still.
yep, yep,
I'm very much a gesture oriented person, and I get that from my mom, good old Mama Remy,
yep.
and I can't stop it. I have to have the hands.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So me trying to type is one thing, but it also means I can't gesture with my hands, which means anytime that I'm typing and talking at the same time, I have to stop and gesture and then go back to typing.
yeah. Yep. I feel
So
that.
it's
I
very
feel that.
funny. It's a struggle, and it just hasn't been one that I've been willing to power through. You get like I got to a point where I'm like I can commentate every single day of the week and do that ad nauseum. Like the only reason I have to stop is because I am tired. There's at no point where I have to be like, oh, I don't get to commentate today because I don't have a gig. I can get a
Right.
local gig. I can do something for some tournament series
There's
across the United States or Canada
there's
and be a part of it.
there's almost always a gig, right? If I mean obviously paying versus not paying is a very different discussion, but like there's always a tournament right now that needs a voice. I think and I've only been told no, man, by two tournaments, I think. And it wasn't like a we would never have you. It was like, oh, we already have people on the mic today. Like that's the only
Yeah.
time I've ever been told no is when they're like, oh, we already got it covered. But
Yeah,
like
that's pretty
there's
much it.
there's so much going on. There's so much going on with COVID that like there's always if you want to practice commentary, there's probably a spot for you.
I've gotten some no responses out of some things because I didn't give a
Yep.
reel, and they're like, "All right, you didn't even leave a reel, so we're not even gonna reach back out to you." I'm like, "All right, that's fair." So you know, it's just one of the things. Every time that I reach out to a tournament organizer directly, they're always willing to have me, stuff like that. Even if I'm not getting on Wednesday Night Fight top eight, I'm like, I talked to Vi, he's like, yeah,
Streaming it. Yeah.
commentate pools, and I've done pools I think 3 or 4 times now. It's still
Yeah.
a really fun experience, and it's definitely an area that's lacking for them, and I'm happy to step in and provide something.
We should set up that one time while you and I commentate that together. That'd be really fun.
That would be great because it's hard to do it all by yourself. I did it one time with James, where James streamed it and I was the
Yeah.
co-commentator, and just the act of me being there and being able to just help him find information out of the Discord or out of Smash GG, anything that helps with the production of side of things. You've seen me with Joe where I'm like, okay, I'll invite people to the lobby. I'm TOing with you. Like I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff. That's me. And I want to help as much as I can to help a production to a certain extent. I definitely draw lines at some point where, like, if your stream is dying, I'll give some advice, but, like, you got to figure out why your stream is dying. I can't be the on-site tech helping you fix things.
You can't remote in, right? It's not as easy. But I mean, at the same time, that's also something I think that makes a decent online commentator, at least, is if you have the knowledge to make stuff happen and you have a knowledge to keep a thing rolling, right? Like we did that with a little behind the scenes talk for Adrenaline, right? Like I was hosting the lobby for the West Coast because I live on the West Coast. So they were like, hey, like, can you host the West Coast lobby and just move to the back?
Yeah. Just, again, like, that was just to try to help eliminate any variables that the players would be worried about, which is big on the production staff to be like, hey, we're concerned about this, and big stuff on you being like, yeah, I can step up and do that stuff. I got to the point with commentating where I'm like, I want to be involved in as little processes as possible.
Sure. Yep. I would agree with that. Like, and a good production, I mean, like, I would say when you get to like a top level production, Nog, right? Like, that is all you're doing is commentating, and there's a whole crew of people in your ear running all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. It's a weird kind of middle ground where I'm like, I don't want to, like, at this point, because of desyncing issues and stuff, I'm like, I don't want to boot up and be in the lobby. If I agree. If I am in a lobby, I'll sit there and invite people because I'm paying attention to what matches are being called, everything like that. If it's on Smash GG, I can see what's lined up. If it's on Challenge, I can look in the Discord and see like who's been called next, especially when we get to a top 8 situation and we're just running through
it's autopilot
list. Which, by the way, nothing annoys me more when the schedule changes. So like not running winners, finals, losers, semis bothers the hell out of me. I'm like, why are you doing
Absolutely.
this? This is very aggravating. Like, I don't. Not only does it mess with the flow and like I not know what's coming up next, but like it's just bad for the players. It's statistically shown worse for the players.
Yeah. Like there's data behind that, right? I will say the only time that doesn't bother me is when, because like when you get into like winners, finals, and loser semis and that stuff, like that should be a set rhythm. I completely agree. But before that, when it's like somebody needs like a bathroom break in the top 8 or something, I was like, okay, we're gonna jump to this match first. Like that kind of stuff, I actually really like when the TO like considers the players in that way.
The ability to adapt on the fly is definitely a benefit. So being able to be like, okay, we this player just disappeared. We're gonna run this match first and hope they show back up.
Exactly.
That's what it is sometimes. So it's definitely it's been really interesting commentating a bunch of online events, and most people don't know that I'm mostly an online commentator. I haven't done too much commentary offline, a couple of times, but most of the time that I commentate offline, I commentate solo. That's another big thing that people don't really realize about me, and people always feel bad about it when I'm like, no, this is great. I love solo commentary. Like, I don't think people understand. I talk a lot. Like, I have a lot of thoughts, and not having to think and be like, okay, I'm gonna leave this pause here. Granted, a lot of the pauses that I leave now are natural, so like I'll pause in situations anyway, and if somebody else starts talking, they can talk, and otherwise I have like a timeout that I reach, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna keep talking.
That was actually one of my hardest adaptations when I stopped commentating with you as much and learning to work with other online commentators, is realizing that their pause was a brain pause and not a natural let the other guy talk pause, because you and I had established such a rhythm. You know what I mean? Like we were just so comfortable. So somebody would pause and I would start talking and they would just talk over me. And I'm like, wait, that wasn't a Nog pause? That wasn't just the, hey, it's your turn, Tom? Okay, I'm sorry. Like it was so weird.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things where it's really weird if you're not used to it. I think it's really respectful, and that's why I always do it. I'll leave a pause, and if somebody else starts talking, that's great. There are times where like I'll hit a point where it's just like there's that pause, and it's naturally like I don't really have anything else to say, and in that half a second, I think of stuff to say, and then I keep going.
Yeah.
But there's also there's plenty of times where it's definitely an opportunity for somebody to hop in.
Yep.
I've also tried to start doing more questions. I'll ask questions of my co-commentator
Yep.
to see how they're feeling. You know, especially when they're newer to the mic, they're a little bit green. You don't want to just dominate and talk over somebody. It was actually a little bit of a struggle during Red Bull. I had some rough partners that weren't you. And going into that event, I was really expecting to commentate a lot with you. And I looked at the schedule. I'm like,
different.
there's no Nogarremi. That's unfortunate.
We are going to learn how to deal with this.
And I was like, okay. But
I think
the adaptation of each time, and there's definitely times where I'm like, I would give a person a pause and then they would never return a pause, or like I would give them a pause and they wouldn't take it. And I'm like,
so
okay.
That's actually something. So I took a commentary lesson from Ultra David, which worth the money in my opinion. Like for what he did for me, like I sent him Red Bull Adrenaline clips and he watched them, and then we sat down and watched them together, and he just like commentated my commentary. It was really interesting and really insightful. But one of the things on that was talking about how you can establish when you're going to take over or steal a turn that he talked about, which I thought was super smart. So like something I do when I commentate, right, is I'll make kind of like hype noises in the background, like, whoo, oh damn, oh, right, like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's good, but if you have a commentator that you have trouble taking turns with, it's actually maybe a better idea to stay quiet. And then, when you need to steal a turn, you can just come in big with something like that and then take over. And I'm like, oh, that's actually, because it's not really rude with online commentary when you can't see the commentator because there's no social cues. It's really, it's asserting like, hey, I need to take a turn. I have something to say. And it's really pushing them off. Yeah. It's like putting your hand up almost.
Yeah.
Really
it's definitely a weird thing, especially when you, the production is using your cameras, but you guys can't see each other. That's always a rough part because you have no idea what's happening or when they're trying to talk or anything like that, which is why I have such a back off approach to commentary. Like I will start talking, and if you start talking, I'm not talking anymore, which is really funny. And we run into this on the West Coast with me, you and Kevin, where it's just like, okay, we all started talking at the same time and we all stopped at the same time.
Yep. All three of us say something, go, whoop.
And then we all start talking again at the same time because we're like, oh, there's a back off period. And we all backed off. And then nobody talks. And then we're all like, okay, back off period's over. Let's all talk again. And it's just like, okay.
And then we all start laughing.
Yeah, then we all laugh, or people shut up again. And then one person's like, I understand the situation. I'm running with it.
Yep.
It's definitely one of those things. And by like the second or third time that it happens, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep talking. Like you guys can figure it out. If you keep talking and I keep talking, then we can figure it out. But like if we both start saying like 2 syllables and both stop, something like we're a little off. But me and Kevin are literally on the exact same wavelength and how we kind of use that back off period. I feel like a lot of times I have maybe it's just the style of like the online local with the long-term commentators, but like we really have that back off period down where it's just like, okay, we're not going to talk because we both started at the same time. And it's why I've developed the habit of saying like, go ahead. Like you'll literally hear me say that so many times when people start talking and there's a back off here. I'm like, go ahead. Like if I hear there's silence, I'll say, go ahead. Like keep talking.
Yep.
Please.
Yep. Totally.
Just to kind of establish who's going to talk in those situations. Once it gets a little more comfortable, like you always know if I take that pause, you can always step in. If you take a pause, I try to step in, which is why the same time is always a conundrum because who steps in? Usually I'll just let it be you because if you're stepping in, it's because something hype is happening. I can just analyze it later. That's always my approach. Sure. It's like, I'll stop talking because I'm analysis and I can always just go through and do this later.
Yep.
But we've talked a long time about commentary, actually.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, might be one of our passions that we do together.
Yeah, we might like that. I don't know. Weird. Strange.
So it's definitely really fun to talk about all of that stuff. I did want to bring it back to programming. We did talk about Python a little bit and coding some Discord bots. Fun stuff. You brought up Python a little bit and how you're used to object-oriented programming, and that's the weirdest thing about Python. When you're not using it as just an extension, you can use it as either a scripting language or a object-oriented language. It does have the support to go through object-oriented. Granted, that is, in my opinion, way more work. Somebody who has used it mostly as a scripting language, it's way more work to go through and set up classes and a whole bunch of stuff. The instantiation process I find very tiresome and long and convoluted, but it has its place. And it's very important if you need multiple objects of something to make sure that there's a class for it so that you can get multiple objects for it. Most of what I write, there's just one object. And I'm like, I don't need to write a whole class for this and have a whole instantiation process because...
Right, I don't need multiple instances of something.
I need one of this. There's no reason for this. Like, the entire reason of having an instantiation process is to make it easy to make more of them. Like, if you're going to have a whole thing where you're having a whole bunch of... let's say you're making like a grocery list app and you need to have a whole bunch of items that you can add to a cart. So you have a cart object that can accept item objects, and there's a whole bunch of item objects, and that makes sense. And you have different types for the items and a whole bunch of stuff like that. The price is different for each item. Everything like that is terrific.
Yeah.
But when all I need to do is make a Discord bot and there's one instance of it, there's not too much. I'm sure there's some things I could instantiate in that to make it run more efficiently. Matter of fact, the original version, as I talked about earlier with Yaksha, was all object oriented in their approach to it. So every time that you're calling a specific style of command, it's in a class, and all of the other commands that relate to it are in there. I didn't draw that distinction, but definitely with how LizardBot works with challenge and some of the edit commands, they get long and kind of convoluted and could definitely use a class to kind of break things out a little bit more. But I can't convert them into classes because I would have to convert everything into classes, and that's a lot of work for so little return. And I'm like, because that's just how Python's going to map the command to the function. Instead of mapping the command to the function, it maps the command to the class of the function, and everything would have to have a class, and it's too much work.
It's work smart, not hard, right? Like, and that's the thing. Like for a game dev, like absolutely object-oriented programming is what you need to do, specifically because you're thinking about objects and components, and you're managing multiple instances of stuff. I mean, like every time you fire a bullet, you're instantiating an object, right? And that bullet has its own instance with its own stuff and its own velocity and its own everything, its own colliders. Same with players, right? Multiplayer games or enemies, they're all their own instances. And so that makes it really nice because, if I write an enemy class, I can then go in and define the enemy health per enemy, and it's all the same class. Those variables are just changing between the instances, right? So I definitely think use what's appropriate, and that's really why I struggled with R, and I still want to do more Python stuff. I just, right now I'm heads down on getting my certification re-upped, and then after that it's like, okay, do I want to learn a new programming language? And like, to me, Python would be the one I'd want to dive into, mainly just for its power in processing data and processing, like text processing, CSV processing, all that type of stuff. Python's really good at that stuff.
It does really good with that. It does well with pulling in database stuff and processing in that. But a database is basically just a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet, or vice versa. A Excel spreadsheet is just a database. It's all relational. So you have a table and a column, and you want to pull it from it. It's the same thing. So it's definitely one of the things. It took me like 21 years of my life to figure out that relation between an Excel sheet and a database, and it was astounding when I made that correlation and be like, especially when I try to work more with something like Google Sheets, I'm like, this is just a database, but I can't pull data from it like a database.
Right.
Frustrating.
You have to just pull it by like column references and stuff.
Yeah, and that's more of an issue with Google Sheets than Excel. Excel will actually let you do SQL queries. Google Sheets
you can do data queries in Sheets. Sheets they have their own Google data language, and it's Excel. It's SQL. It's SQL. It's just you have to do equals query, and then you write some stuff. But I do that at work quite a bit.
It's it's one of the things where I could probably make things more efficient, especially with those of you who don't know, the LizardBot does actually pull in from a Google Sheet if necessary for each
seeding, right?
Yeah, for each seeding that we do. If there's a seeding sheet set, we can do it. Yep. I worked on that that was a pain in the butt. First time working with Sheets. First time really working with Sheets and dynamically getting data from it. First time using the API to get data from it.
Yeah.
It was a process, and I'm sure I could fix some of that stuff to look better. That Sheets function is, I think, almost 1,000 lines. And I broke it out into a couple of other things, but a lot of it is just data queries. So like the dictionary, the Python dictionary that has to get set up to query what information I need to put into Google Sheets is hundreds of lines long sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's for each sheet, and it's just so much work.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work. I'm like,
that was probably the longest dev time I spent on the Lizard bot was going through Sheets. It was such a pain in the butt. But other than that, go ahead.
Oh, I've heard there's a library in Python that does Google Sheet stuff. It's called like PySheets or PyGoogle.
I know Google. So Google has their own stuff that they tell you to set up. But is there a different library for it? I could have made this easier on myself. I still have to
I think so.
I still have to write all of the parameters to send though. That would still be the big thing.
I'd have to go check my Slack history at work because I was working on some Google Sheet stuff, and one of our data guys was telling me that I should have. There's a certain Py library I could use to pull data from Sheets. But I don't remember what it was.
It's definitely one of those things. But like the longest and most difficult part was ordering and setting up the queries in the proper way, or the parameters for the queries in the proper way, because they get very long and complicated and convoluted. But there's a lot of simple ideals I can kind of give you for like beginner applications to run through Python with. So if you want to get more of that stuff, I've done stuff with classes. So if you want like a good class example, I can show some of that stuff. Well, I won't say good. If you want a class example with something in it, I think I have a lot of GitHub repos. If you just go to github.com/Nogarremi, you'll find a lot of my stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I'll go poke around at it because like when I get some time to look at Python more, because that's something I've always wanted to dive into. And like honestly, like the company I work for also provides a large library of online learning content for Python, so I should probably watch some of those courses as well.
Yeah, but sometimes just, and in my opinion, and it's just the way that I've always done programming. I just do stuff. I'm like, I'm gonna do this thing.
Yeah.
It's gonna be frustrating. I'm gonna butt my head a lot of times because I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I know what I want to do, and so I'll keep poking around until I figure out what ways I can do it, and which ways are supported, which ways are going to be overly long and complicated, and how to work around that. It's an entire process, but I'm a very iterative person when I program, and so I'm going to try a lot of things, see what works, print a lot of stuff to command line, figure out, if the data that I'm pulling. This is why every time I use an API, I'll just do a request, a GET request to the endpoint and been like, what data are you giving me, and how can I parse through it in a reasonable manner? I don't really actually use too many libraries to actually pull API stuff from. I don't use the Challenge API to pull any of the Challenge stuff for Lizard.
Interesting.
We all just use curl. I have used the Challenge API since I did some stuff for Sniffles to help make things better when he's pulling stuff to do points. So I have used it, but it feels really weird compared to just doing a GET request and just rolling with it from there. There's a little bit of a learning curve. You have to figure, like when I first was doing API stuff, I had to learn how to actually send parameters or headers depending, because sometimes different APIs do different things. Sometimes your API key has to be in your header, sometimes it has to be in your parameter. There's a different and it gets weird, but it's fun though. It's definitely fun. I definitely love iterating over things. I definitely go through and do a lot more coding than I probably should, because I manage everything for RIT-FGC. I manage everything for RSF at this point. I have my own APIs that I write and maintain and interact with. Everything that I go through gets a little crazy, but I also have some basic things like calculating how many push-ups to do on a certain day, given how many days it's been from the start of the year. Or if it's a leap year for that matter as well. I actually had to, my dad actually uses that little program, and he hit me up and be like, I don't think this calculates leap years properly. I'm like, you're probably right.
Well, I wasn't thinking about those, Dad.
It's like, yeah, Dad Remy was like, yeah, cool, but it's a leap year this year, and I need to have this. My dad did like almost over 100,000 push-ups this year.
Nice.
So that's a little bit insane when you think about it. But this has been going on for a little bit. We've been rambling on for a little bit. You got anything else that you want to promote or say here?
No, not really. Thanks for hanging out, man. It's always good catching up with you. My commentary reel's coming soon. Keep an eye out. Probably end of the month. And if you want to come hang out with me and write code or play whatever video game I'm feeling like, twitch.tv/Thomas Winkley. Go to your locals, play online tournaments, be kind to each other, donate money to causes that need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to talk about, enter a whole bunch of online tournaments. Don't forget that you're running an online series, twitch.tv/GetGoodFGC, if you're looking for their stream. Where else can people find information to get involved in that series?
Yeah, so twitter.com/GetGoodFGC. We're doing, so it's West Coast. The rules are posted. You have to be within 600 miles by fiber or 50 millisecond ping. If you're close to that, hit me up, we'll talk. But it's basically a 3-month, similar to Salt Mine League. Top 8 of each tournament get points, and then the top 8 will be invited to a season finale where we'll run like a big fancy top 8 with hopefully big loud commentators and fun production. And right now, first place on top of the Matcherino is going to get a pair of Astro A50s. Second place will probably get a different headset, and then third place will get something as well. So we've got prizes lined up. So yeah, we do 2 tournaments a month. Bar Fights is actually this Thursday, so the day after this releases. And then Ringside Rumble's the first Saturday of every month. So 6 tournaments, and then a big old top 8 to close out the season, and we'll start the next season after.
Sounds like a ton of fun. That's going to be it, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Peace.
Bye.